On the coldest morning Frosthaven had seen in years, an elderly couple stood silently at the edge of the frozen market. No pleas, no explanations, just a piece of cardboard with a name and a price. They weren't selling their dog because they stopped loving him. They were selling him because love alone couldn't keep them alive. As the wind cut deeper and time ran out, fear settled in. Quiet, invisible, merciless, until one man stopped. Not a hero, not a savior, just a veteran who knew what it meant to never leave anyone behind. What followed wasn't loud, but it changed everything. Because sometimes, the smallest decision becomes a miracle that saves an entire winter. The winter market in Frosthaven came alive before the sun fully committed to the day. Light crept in sideways, pale and hesitant, sliding across the packed snow as if it might break if it pressed too hard. Breath showed everywhere, short, sharp clouds that vanished as quickly as they formed. Boots crunched. Metal awnings rattled softly in the wind. At the far edge of the square, where the cold cut hardest between two aging brick buildings, an elderly couple stood without moving. They weren't calling out. They weren't waving people over. They weren't asking for anything. They were simply there. A piece of cardboard leaned against a wooden crate at their feet, held down by a stone worn smooth with age. The writing was neat and deliberate, the kind that came from someone who believed words should be clear and honest. It read, "Rex, $100. Nothing more. No breed. No explanation. No plea. Just a name and a price." Between the couple stood the dog. Rex was a full-grown German shepherd, brown and black, his frame lean but powerful, muscles still firm beneath a winter coat, dulled by long months of careful rationing. Around his neck was a thick, tactical collar. Not decorative, not new, stitched with a single word in white block letters. Rex. He didn't sit. He didn't lie down. He didn't whine or paw at passing legs. He stood. Rex positioned himself slightly forward of the couple, angling his body so the wind hit his shoulder first. When the old man's hands trembled from the cold, Rex shifted closer without touching, offering warmth without asking for credit. When a stronger gust cut through the square, he widened his stance, paws steady, weight balanced like he'd learned long ago how to brace against worse. People passed by. Some slowed just long enough to frown at the cardboard. One man scoffed under his breath. A woman glanced at the dog, then at the couple, then walked on faster, as if lingering too long might require something of her. A few whispered. A few shook their heads. No one asked the dog's name. The name was right there. The old man, Walter, kept his chin lifted despite the cough rattling in his chest. It came in waves, rough and stubborn, and each time he fought it down with quiet determination. His shoulders were squared, not from strength, but from habit. From years of refusing to bend. Beside him stood Irene, smaller, bundled tight in a wool coat that had seen many winters. Her posture was straight, her gloved hands folded neatly in front of her. She watched the crowd with calm, measuring eyes, the look of someone who had spent a lifetime observing people and learning not to expect too much from them. Rex watched everything. He tracked movement without tension, ears forward, eyes steady. He could tell the difference between curiosity and calculation, between someone looking and someone weighing. That was what stopped Ethan Walker. He hadn't planned on stopping. Ethan moved through Frosthaven the way he moved through most places, quietly, deliberately, as if trying not to disturb the air around him. He wore a faded multicam jacket, the fabric softened and worn thin at the elbows. A black military-style watch sat heavy on his wrist, the kind built to survive more than time. 2 dog tags rested against his chest beneath the jacket, metal tapping softly with each step. On his head was a weathered cap that read, U.S. Army Veteran. It wasn't an announcement, it was a fact. His eyes scanned the square out of habit. Angles, exits, spacing. He noted the wind direction without thinking, counted steps without meaning to. He would have walked past the cardboard sign. He almost did. But the dog was too still. Rex lifted his head as Ethan drew even with the crate. Their eyes met. There was no excitement in Rex's gaze, no fear, no plea, just a steady look that felt uncomfortably familiar. It reminded Ethan of men he'd known, men who didn't waste energy on hope because hope had never been part of the plan. Men who waited because waiting was sometimes all you could do. Ethan slowed, then stopped. He told himself it was nothing, just a dog, just winter playing tricks on the mind, but the weight settled in his chest anyway. He looked down at the cardboard. Rex, $100, that his name? Ethan asked, voice low, even. Walter nodded once. Yes. No explanation followed. Ethan crouched, careful not to invade the dog's space. He didn't reach out. He didn't make noises. He studied Rex the way he would have studied a fellow soldier. Posture, awareness, restraint. This wasn't a dog that had been raised soft. This was a dog that understood discipline. He trained? Ethan asked. Not formally, Irene said. Her voice was calm, practiced. He learned what he needed to learn. Ethan nodded. How much? He asked, though the sign was clear. 100, Walter replied. No hesitation, no apology. Ethan straightened. Snow creaked beneath his boots. He looked at the couple, not with pity, but with assessment. They weren't desperate in the way people expected desperation to look. They weren't bargaining. They weren't pleading. They were holding a line. I need to think, Ethan said. Walter inclined his head slightly. Irene didn't react at all. Ethan turned and walked away. He told himself it was the rational choice. He told himself he wasn't looking for responsibility. He told himself he'd learned a long time ago not to get involved. 2 blocks later, he stopped. The market sounds faded behind him, swallowed by the quiet of frozen streets. His breath stayed controlled, but his chest felt tight, the familiar pressure of something unfinished. He turned his head. Across the distance, Rex stood exactly where Ethan had left him. Same position, same stance, same steady gaze, not chasing, not calling, waiting. Ethan stood there longer than he needed to. Then he went home. His house sat near the tree line, modest and orderly. Inside, everything was where it belonged. Jacket on the hook, boots aligned, keys placed just so. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't sit down. He pulled a dented metal box from beneath the small table near the window and opened it. Inside were things he rarely touched, objects tied to a life he carried but didn't often unpack. He closed the box, then opened it again. Outside, the light faded early. Winter pressed close to the glass. Somewhere in Frosthaven, an old couple stood in the cold with a piece of cardboard that held only a name and a number, and a dog who did not beg. Ethan rested his hands on the table and stared at the box, the past laid out in front of him like a map he hadn't meant to read tonight. He didn't make a decision yet. But for the first time in a long while, he understood something clearly. Seeing the sign had been easy. Walking away from the name was not. The market was thinner the next morning. The cold had sharpened overnight, the kind that made the air feel brittle, as if it might crack if you breathed too hard. Frosthaven woke slowly, reluctant. A few vendors set up in silence, fingers stiff, movements economical. Steam rose from paper cups and vanished. At the far edge of the square, the cardboard sign was still there. Rex, $100, same crate, same stone, same careful handwriting. Walter stood with his hands tucked deep into his coat pockets, shoulders squared against the wind. Irene was beside him, scarf pulled higher today, eyes alert behind wire-rimmed glasses. They hadn't moved closer to the crowd. They hadn't moved away. Rex stood between them. He was positioned the same way as yesterday, half a step forward, angled into the wind. His ears flicked at distant sounds. His gaze swept the square with patient attention. When someone slowed, he watched. When they passed, he reset. He noticed Ethan before Ethan noticed him. Rex's head lifted. His posture changed. Not excited, not tense, simply attentive, as if a variable he'd been tracking had returned to the field. Ethan crossed the square without hurrying. He wore the same faded multicam jacket, the same black watch, the same cap pulled low. Snow crunched under his boots in a steady rhythm. His face was calm, unreadable, eyes fixed on the crate as if it were a waypoint he'd already decided to reach. He stopped in front of the sign. Walter looked up first. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion, but recognition. Irene followed his gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. "You came back," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied. No explanation followed. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. He placed it on the crate, weighed it down with his gloved hand so the wind wouldn't take it. 100, he said. Cash. Walter didn't touch it. Irene studied Ethan more closely now, the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes moved, measured, aware, the discipline that didn't announce itself. "Before anything," she said, "we need to ask you some questions." Ethan nodded once. "You have a place for him?" Walter asked. "Yes." "Heat?" Irene added. "Yes." "You work?" "I did." A pause. "I'm retired," Ethan said. "Army." Walter glanced at the cap, at the dog tags that shifted slightly beneath the jacket when Ethan breathed. "You live alone?" Irene asked. "Yes." Rex shifted his weight. It was subtle, a small adjustment, pause settling deeper into the snow. His eyes moved from Ethan to Irene, then back again. "You understand," Irene continued, "that this isn't permanent ownership." Ethan met her gaze. "I understand." "If he needs to come back," she said. "If he wants to come back. You let him." Ethan didn't answer immediately. The wind pushed harder between the buildings. Somewhere a tarp snapped loose and flapped, sharp and loud. Rex didn't flinch. "I won't stop him," Ethan said at last. Walter exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath longer than he realized. Irene reached down and rested her gloved hand briefly on Rex's collar. Not to restrain him, just to ground herself. "You hear that, boy?" she murmured. Rex didn't look at her. He was watching Ethan. No leash was offered. No command was given. Rex took one step forward on his own, then another. He stopped halfway between the crate and Ethan, turned his head slightly, and looked back at Walter and Irene. It wasn't hesitation. It was acknowledgement. Walter swallowed. His jaw tightened. "You go on," he said quietly. "We're right here." Rex returned his gaze to Ethan. Then he closed the distance. He didn't brush against Ethan's leg, didn't crowd him. He simply aligned himself at Ethan's side, shoulder level with the man's knee, posture straight and ready. Ethan didn't reach down. He didn't touch the collar. He just stood there, letting the moment settle. Irene picked up the envelope and tucked it into her coat. "You'll bring him by?" she said. It wasn't a request. "Yes," Ethan said. Walter nodded once. "He likes the quiet," he added, "and he doesn't eat fast." Rex flicked an ear. Ethan turned, and Rex turned with him. They walked away together, steps sinking without effort. No leash, no command, just movement. 2 streets over, Ethan stopped. Rex stopped too. Ethan crouched then, not in front of Rex, but beside him. Close enough to be present, far enough to respect space. "We'll take it slow," Ethan said. His voice was low, steady. "You don't owe me anything." Rex watched him. Snow drifted between them. After a moment, Rex sat. It wasn't obedience. It was agreement. Ethan stood and continued home. Inside the house, Rex moved carefully, nose low, mapping the space through scent and sound. He paused at the heater, then the window, then the hallway. He chose a spot where he could see the front door and the narrow passage beyond. Ethan set down a bowl of food and stepped back. Rex approached, sniffed. Then he turned away and sat facing the door. Minutes passed. The heater hummed. The house creaked as it adjusted to the cold. Outside, the wind softened. Only when the light outside began to fade did Rex return to the bowl and eat. Slowly, deliberately, as if confirming something unseen before allowing himself to rest. Ethan watched from the kitchen. He felt a tightness rise in his throat, unfamiliar and unwelcome. Rex wasn't waiting for food. He'd been waiting to be sure. That evening, Rex paced once, then settled near Ethan's chair, back to the man, eyes on the room. Guarding without pressing, present without demand. Ethan reached up and touched the dog tags beneath his jacket, feeling their familiar weight. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt shared. Rex chose the route. Ethan noticed it the 3rd morning after they'd left the market together. Not because Rex pulled, he never did, but because he slowed at a corner that didn't lead home. His pace changed just enough to matter. His body angled, patient, insistent. Ethan stopped. "You sure?" he asked quietly, more habit than expectation. Rex looked up once, then faced forward again. That was answer enough. The street was older on this side of Frosthaven. Houses sat lower to the ground. Paint faded. Roofs sagging just enough to tell stories about winters that never fully let go. Walter and Irene's place stood near the end of the block, narrow and careful, smoke rising thinly from the chimney. Rex reached the steps and stopped. He didn't rush the door. He waited. Ethan knocked. It took a moment, then another. Finally, Irene's footsteps sounded inside, measured, deliberate. The door opened a few inches before she recognized them. "Oh," she said softly. "You came." Rex stepped forward, ears relaxed, tail low. He pressed his shoulder briefly against Irene's leg, then moved inside without hesitation. Walter was in the living room, seated near the window with a blanket folded across his knees. He looked thinner than Ethan remembered. The cough was still there, quiet now, held back by will more than comfort. "Well," Walter said, managing a small smile. "Looks like he found his way." "He led," Ethan replied. Rex paused in the center of the room, eyes moving slowly. He checked corners, windows, the narrow hallway. When he was satisfied, he sat near Walter's chair, close enough to touch, but not crowd. Irene noticed Ethan's gaze drift to the dining table. The papers were spread neatly, weighted at the corners with a mug and a folded dish towel. Forms, brochures. A slim folder stamped with a logo Ethan didn't recognize. She followed his look and sighed. We meant to put those away. You don't have to, Ethan said. I was just noticing. Walter cleared his throat. It's nothing to worry about. Rex lifted his head. Ethan didn't respond right away. He stepped closer to the table, careful not to touch anything. He read titles, not details. Senior Property Assistance Program, Temporary Management Agreement, Cost Optimization Summary. The language was clean, professional, designed to reassure. Who brought this to you? Ethan asked. Walter shifted slightly. A man came by in the fall, said he was helping folks stay in their homes, lower taxes, less stress. He spoke plain, Irene added. Didn't rush us. Rex stood. He moved to Irene's side, positioning himself between her and the table, not blocking, just present. Ethan had seen that stance before. It was what came before a warning. You signed already? Ethan asked. Yes, Walter said. Everything's explained. Ethan nodded. Mind if I look? The room went quiet. Irene hesitated. Not because she didn't trust Ethan, but because trust, once given, became harder to reclaim. Walter met her eyes, then nodded. Go on, he said. Ethan sat. He didn't skim. He read the way he'd been trained to read field orders, slow, deliberate, paying attention to what was said and what wasn't. Temporary, non-intrusive, supportive. Words that softened edges. The agreement didn't take the house. Not outright. It didn't sell anything. It didn't even look predatory at first glance. But the authority was broad. Temporary representation, operational discretion, third-party optimization rights. Ethan felt the familiar tightening behind his ribs. Did they explain this part? He asked, tapping a paragraph near the bottom. Walter frowned. They said it meant fewer headaches. Ethan nodded. That's one way to put it. Rex shifted again. His ears flicked toward the front window. Outside, a car passed slowly. Too slowly. Ethan continued reading. The dates lined up too neatly. The language repeated in places where it shouldn't have. There were references to assessments that hadn't been done. Decisions authorized before conversations had happened. It wasn't illegal. It was patient. Did they say they'd be coming back? Ethan asked. Just to check in, Irene said. Make sure we were comfortable. Rex walked to the window and stood there, body rigid, eyes fixed on the street. Ethan followed his gaze. A flyer lay half buried in the snow near the curb, bright against the gray. The same logo from the folder. The same clean font. Promises printed in confident blue ink. Ethan stepped outside and picked it up. Rex's posture tightened. Not aggressive, but alert. The flyer smelled faintly of chemicals and cold paper. It promised peace of mind, simplicity, security. Ethan folded it once and slipped it into his jacket. I can't promise anything, he said when he returned. But I can ask questions. Walter nodded. Oh, that's more than we've had. Irene reached for Rex's collar and rested her hand there, grounding herself. He doesn't like that paperwork, she said quietly. No, Ethan replied. He doesn't. They stayed a while longer. Long enough for the kettle to boil. Long enough for Rex to settle at Walter's feet, chin resting briefly against the old man's knee. When Ethan stood to leave, Rex followed. At the door, Rex stopped and looked back. Walter met his eyes. Go on, he said again. We'll see you soon. Outside, the air felt sharper. They walked home in silence. Ethan didn't speak until they reached his porch. I'll look into it, he said. Rex sat. Agreement. Ethan didn't rush. He learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose the truth was to chase it. So he waited until the next morning, when Frosthaven had settled into its quiet routines, when offices opened and doors unlocked without ceremony. Rex walked beside him, head level, pace even. They stopped outside the municipal building, a low structure of brick and glass that tried too hard to look welcoming. Flags snapped lightly in the wind. The parking lot was half full. People came here to fix small things, licenses, permits, questions that needed stamps. Ethan held the folder against his side, thumb marking the pages he wanted to talk about. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. Rex paused at the threshold, ears flicking, then stepped in. He didn't pull. He didn't hesitate. He adjusted. A woman stood at the end of the hall, speaking quietly with a clerk. She wore a navy jacket with a county patch stitched cleanly on the shoulder. Her hair was pulled back, practical, a few loose strands escaping the tie. She moved with economy, no wasted gestures. Deputy Mara Lane. Ethan waited until the conversation ended. "Mornin'," he said. Mara turned. Her eyes took in Ethan's posture first, then the dog, then the folder. "Morning. I was told you handle property matters," Ethan said. "I handle things that don't fit anywhere else," she replied. "What have you got?" Ethan didn't dramatize. He never did. He laid the folder on a narrow counter and opened it to the first page, then the second, then the paragraph he'd marked. Mara read without interrupting. Rex sat at Ethan's left knee, posture upright, eyes scanning the hall behind them. He wasn't guarding the deputy. He was guarding the space. "This program's been showing up," Mara said after a moment. "Different names, same language." "Legal?" Ethan asked. "Mostly," she replied. "But that's the trouble." She tapped a line with her pen. "It doesn't take the house. It takes time. Authority. Decisions people don't realize they've handed over until something goes wrong." Ethan nodded. "Anyone filed complaints?" he asked. Mara's mouth tightened. "People don't complain about help. Not until it's too late." She closed the folder. "I can log this. I can request a review. But I need patterns." "I'll watch," Ethan said. Mara met his eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't reassure. She respected the answer. Outside, Rex exhaled slowly once they cleared the doorway. That afternoon, the check-ins started. A clean sedan parked across from Walter and Irene's house. A man stepped out carrying a small gift bag and a clipboard. He smiled easily. Waved. Rex noticed before Ethan did. He moved to the window and stood there, body angled, eyes steady. Not stiff. Alert. Ethan watched from the porch as the man knocked. "Just stopping by," the man said when Irene answered. "Making sure everything's all right." He spoke softly, warmly, like someone used to being trusted. Ethan stayed back. He didn't introduce himself. Rex walked forward and stopped just inside the doorway, placing himself between Irene and the visitor. No sound, no teeth, just presence. The man laughed lightly. "Well, aren't you protective?" "He is," Irene replied, her voice even. The visit was short. The man left a brochure and a promise to return. Rex didn't move until the car drove off. That night, Ethan spread the papers out on his table. He compared dates, crossed references, not looking for crimes, looking for rhythm. The phone rang once. "Lane," Mara said. "I ran your program through county records." "And?" "Same company holds management rights on 3 other homes, all seniors, all temporary, all still waiting for the benefits they were promised." "What happens if they want out?" Ethan asked. "They can," Mara said. "On paper, After fees, after notices, after time. Time again. Rex paced once, then settled near the door, back to Ethan, eyes on the room. The next morning, Ethan walked the neighborhood. He didn't knock. He noticed. Mail piled up on porches, windows fogged unevenly, flyers tucked under doors with the same logo, the same color blue, the same promises. Rex stopped at one house and sat. Ethan knocked. An older woman answered, cautious, curious. Rex stepped back once she opened the door, posture easing. "We're checking on folks," Ethan said. "You doing all right?" She nodded too quickly. "They said they'd handle it." "They who?" She glanced at the brochure on her table. Rex sat quietly, listening. Ethan didn't push. He left his name and walked on. By afternoon, Mara called again. "We've got enough to open a review," she said. "Not a takedown, a pause." "That's something," Ethan replied. "It is," she agreed, "but expect pressure." The pressure came politely. A letter arrived addressed to Ethan, neat and official. A request for documentation regarding Rex's registration. A follow-up visit scheduled. Rex watched Ethan read it, then stood and sat again, as if marking time. "They'll find everything in order," Ethan said. And they did. The inspection was brief, professional, by the book. Rex remained calm throughout, posture cooperative, eyes observant. The officer nodded, satisfied. When the door closed, the house felt lighter. That evening, Mara called once more. "There's a town meeting," she said. "They're presenting the program publicly." Ethan looked at Rex. Rex looked back. "We'll be there," Ethan said. The meeting room above the Frosthaven library smelled like dust and radiator heat. Folding chairs scraped against the floor as people settled in, coats still on, breath visible when the door opened. No banners, no microphones. Just a handwritten notice taped to the community board and a promise of information. Ethan took a seat near the back. Rex lay at his feet, chin resting on his paws, eyes open. He didn't sleep in rooms like this. He watched them. Walter and Irene arrived together, Irene steadying Walter by the elbow. They chose a chair near the aisle. Walter's cough was quieter tonight, but it lingered, like something waiting its turn. The representative arrived late. He moved with confidence that didn't rush. Dark coat, neat shoes, smile calibrated for rooms that wanted to be reassured. He carried a slim folder and a rolled poster board tucked under one arm. When he spoke, his voice filled the space without pressing. "Thank you for coming out," he said. "I know winter makes everything harder." Nods traveled the room. He introduced the Senior Property Assistance Program again, as if the name alone carried warmth. He spoke of relief, of peace of mind, of staying put. The poster board came open to show clean charts and rounded numbers. No fine print on the wall, no deadlines in the air. Ethan listened. He watched where the man stood when he spoke, how he angled himself toward the center, how he used pauses to invite agreement. He watched the room more than the speaker, the way shoulders relaxed, the way people leaned forward when the word help landed. Rex shifted once. The representative smiled wider. "We don't take homes," he said lightly. "We protect them." Someone in the front row laughed, relieved. Ethan stayed still. When questions opened, a hand went up about taxes, another about repairs. Each answer came back smooth, layered in assurance. Temporary, flexible, supportive. Walter raised his hand halfway, then lowered it. Rex lifted his head. Ethan stood. He didn't announce himself. He didn't move toward the front. He just rose where he was, and waited until the room noticed. "I'm not here to argue," Ethan said. His voice carried without effort. "I'm here because people trust paper." The representative turned, smile intact. "And that's good," he said. "That's why we're transparent." Ethan nodded once. Transparency works better when dates line up. The room quieted, not fully, but enough. "I've read the agreements," Ethan continued. "They don't take ownership. They take authority. Those aren't the same thing." A murmur moved through the chairs. The representative chuckled softly. "That's a misunderstanding." "Then explain why operational discretion extends beyond assessments," Ethan said, "and why representation doesn't sunset without fees." The smile thinned, only slightly. "That language allows us to move quickly," the man said. "Speed helps seniors." "Speed helps people who don't want questions," Ethan replied. The representative shifted his weight. He took a step down the aisle, angling toward Walter and Irene as if to ground the conversation in something familiar. "We're talking about support," he said gently. "Your neighbors." Rex stood. It wasn't abrupt. It wasn't aggressive. 4 paws placed themselves into the aisle, square and calm, forming a boundary where there had been space. His head was level, his eyes steady. He didn't growl. He didn't bare teeth. He just stood there. The room noticed. "Sir," the representative said, keeping his tone polite, "could you control your dog?" Ethan didn't move. "He's controlled." Rex barked once, not loud, not long, a single sound, perfectly timed. It cut through the practiced calm like a bell. Silence followed. In that quiet, something shifted. Not fear, recognition. The sound wasn't a warning to attack. It was a warning to listen. Walter's hand rose again. This time he didn't lower it. "They told us it was temporary," Walter said. His voice was thin but steady. "They told us it would ease things." The representative nodded quickly. "And it will." "Then why?" Walter continued. "Does it keep asking for more time?" No one answered immediately. Ethan stayed where he was. He didn't press. He didn't pile on. He let the question breathe. A woman near the wall spoke next. "They came by my place too." Another voice followed. "Mine as well." The representative's smile returned in pieces. "We're happy to review any concerns privately." Mara Lane stood. She hadn't announced herself earlier. She didn't now. She stepped into the aisle with a stack of copies and set them on the table at the front. "These are summaries," she said calmly. "Public record. Management agreements clustered by address." She didn't accuse. She didn't raise her voice. She let the dates speak. The committee chair, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "We'll need time to review this." "Of course," the representative said. "Transparency benefits everyone." Rex sat. The meeting ended without applause. Without victory, chairs folded, people spoke in low voices, coats went back on. Outside, the cold pressed close again. Walter stood on the steps with Irene, shoulders squared. "Thank you," he said, not to anyone in particular. Ethan shook his head. "It's not done." "I know," Irene replied. "But it started." Rex pressed briefly against Walter's leg, then stepped back. They walked home under a sky that felt lighter for reasons Ethan didn't trust yet. At his kitchen table later that night, Ethan spread the papers again. Rex lay with his back to Ethan's chair, facing the door. The phone rang once. "It's paused," Mara said. "Pending review." "That'll bring pressure," Ethan replied. "Yes," she said. "But it buys time." Ethan looked at Rex. Rex breathed evenly. "Time's enough," Ethan said, "for now." The pressure didn't arrive loud. It arrived on letterhead. Ethan found the envelope wedged cleanly into his mailbox the morning after the meeting. White, heavy paper. The town seal printed crisp in the corner, as if clarity alone could make intent harmless. Rex stood beside him while he read. Breath steady, ears neutral. Request for verification. Property occupancy confirmation. Follow-up review scheduled. Nothing accusatory, nothing wrong. Just questions that took time to answer and time away to answer them. "They're careful," Ethan said quietly. Rex didn't look at the paper. He watched the street. The review was brief and correct. A clerk checked boxes. A supervisor nodded. Ethan signed where indicated. Rex lay at his feet, still as a shadow that chose to be there. When it was done, the clerk smiled with relief, as if relieved that order had survived another morning. Outside, the wind had teeth again. That afternoon, Rex set the pace. He slowed near houses Ethan hadn't noticed before. Not dramatically, just enough to register. He sat at one porch with mail stacked too neatly to be accidental. At another, he paused beneath a window fogged unevenly, heat fighting a losing battle inside. Ethan knocked. Most doors opened with caution. Some didn't open at all. When they did, the conversations were brief and polite. "We're doing fine. They're helping us. It's temporary." The same words in different voices. Rex never crossed thresholds uninvited. He sat, he waited, he listened. When the air felt wrong, he didn't move. At one house, an older man named Arthur let them in. The living room was tidy to the point of strain, as if neatness might keep something at bay. Arthur talked about the program with careful gratitude. He showed Ethan a document he didn't understand, but trusted because it had been explained slowly. Rex stood between Arthur and the coffee table, head level, ears forward. Ethan read. The clause was buried. Authority extended for continuity. Decisions deferred for efficiency. Exit options listed without dates. "Has anyone come by since the meeting?" Ethan asked. Arthur nodded. "They said not to worry. That reviews mean delays." Rex exhaled through his nose, a quiet sound that wasn't quite a sigh. That evening, Mara Lane called. "They're tightening," she said. "Nothing illegal, just inconvenient." "They'll want us tired," Ethan replied. "Yes," Mara said, "and quiet." Rex paced once, then settled facing the door. The next sign arrived without paper. Rex woke Ethan before dawn, not with noise, with presence. He stood at the bedroom door, posture rigid, eyes fixed. Ethan sat up immediately, heart already moving. He listened. There was a sound beneath the house, not loud, not steady, a low, irregular thrum that didn't belong. Ethan pulled on his jacket and boots. He moved through the kitchen without turning on lights. Rex stayed close, not crowding, not leading, aligned. Outside, the cold bit hard. Frost cracked underfoot. The sound came again, faint, from down the block. Rex angled toward Walter and Irene's street. They ran. The house looked unchanged from the outside. Smoke rose thinly from the chimney. A porch light glowed. Too normal. Inside, the air felt wrong immediately. Heavy, metallic, like something tired. Walter sat in his chair, eyes half-lidded, breathing shallow. Irene knelt beside him, hands steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "The monitor chirped," she said when she saw Ethan. "Just once." Rex moved without command. He approached the utility closet, sniffed, then backed away and planted himself between Walter and the door, body rigid, ears forward, Ethan didn't hesitate. Windows first, door second, system off at the breaker. He spoke calmly, evenly, as if calm could be borrowed when needed. Emergency services arrived quickly. The medics moved with practiced ease. Walter's oxygen levels were low but rising. The room began to breathe again. "You did the right thing," one of them said to Irene. "Another hour might have been different." Ethan stood back, hands in his pockets, watching Rex watch the room. The dog didn't lie down. He counted movements, doors, time. When it was over, Mara arrived with an inspector. The assessment was clear. "It's not a failure," the inspector said. "It's a strain. Adjustments made under management authority. Settings altered to reduce costs." "Who authorized that?" Irene asked. The inspector pointed to the paperwork on the counter. Rex's ears flicked. Mara's jaw set. "That's enough," she said quietly. The next days were busy without being dramatic. Notices went out. Reviews expanded. Temporary authorities were suspended pending safety checks. The program's representative called, left a message, polite, concerned, suggesting cooperation. Ethan didn't return the call. Instead, he walked. Rex set the route. Houses where the air felt off. Houses where decisions had been made quietly. Ethan knocked. He listened. He documented. Mara met him where she could. The pattern sharpened. Pressure came again, this time dressed as courtesy. Another letter, another request, another delay. Ethan answered each one. At night, Rex slept lighter, always facing the door, always counting. One evening, as the cold eased its grip just enough to breathe, Ethan sat at the table with the metal box open. He took out one item and set it down. He didn't look at it long. He made a call. The next morning, he brought paperwork to Mara. Not dramatic, just sufficient. "This helps," she said. "It doesn't end it, but it holds." Outside, Rex leaned briefly against Ethan's leg, then stepped away. The town didn't celebrate, but heaters were checked, settings restored, monitors replaced, authority narrowed, time bought. That night, Ethan watched Rex eat slowly, deliberately, as if confirming something unseen before allowing himself to rest. Pressure hadn't gone away, but it had learned to wait. And so had they. The second meeting didn't feel like the first. There were more chairs this time, fewer smiles. The room above the library filled early, coats hung where they could, breath quieter now that people knew why they'd come. Papers rested on laps instead of folded in pockets. Pens were uncapped. Ethan took the same seat near the back. Rex lay at his feet again, chin on paws, eyes open. He watched the door. He watched the aisle. He watched the spaces people didn't think to watch. Walter arrived with Irene and moved slower than before, but steadier. His color was better. The cough hadn't disappeared, but it waited now, like something that had lost the advantage of surprise. Deputy Mara Lane stood near the front with a thin stack of folders. She didn't arrange them. She didn't need to. The representative came on time this time. Same neat coat, same measured smile. He greeted the room as if greeting could smooth the air. He spoke about cooperation, about shared goals, about misunderstandings cleared up through dialogue. Ethan listened. He noticed what the man didn't say. No promises now, no timelines, just language meant to settle without committing. Mara stepped forward. "We're here to close the loop," she said, calm, unadorned. "We've completed safety checks and a document review." She didn't accuse. She didn't editorialize. She placed copies on the table and let the sound of paper land. "Non-temporary management authority is suspended pending a full audit," she continued. Effective immediately. A low murmur moved through the room. Not applause, not relief. Something heavier, something like readiness. The representative nodded once, slow. We'll cooperate. Good, Mara said. You'll also refrain from individual outreach while the review is active. The smile tightened. That will delay assistance. It will prevent harm, Mara replied. Walter raised his hand. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. We signed because we trusted, he said. His voice carried without strain. Trust isn't a mistake. It's a responsibility. On both sides. The representative opened his mouth. Rex stood. Again, it wasn't sudden. 4 paws placed squarely into the aisle. Head level, body calm. A boundary drawn without a word. The representative stopped. I don't think that's necessary, he said. Ethan spoke without standing. It is. Rex didn't bark this time. He didn't need to. The chair of the committee, a woman with silver hair pulled tight and eyes that missed little, cleared her throat. We'll proceed, she said. With testimony. The room changed. People spoke. Not all at once, not dramatically. One by one. A missed appointment. A setting changed without notice. A letter that came late. A promise that stretched longer than expected. Ethan didn't add to it. He listened. When it was done, the committee voted. Not unanimously, enough. The authority stayed suspended. The audit would continue. A public report would follow. Outside, the sky had lifted. Not warm, just honest. Walter stood on the steps with Irene, hands resting on the rail. It's not over, he said. No, Ethan replied, but it's not quiet anymore. Rex pressed briefly against Walter's leg, then stepped back. The days that followed were work, not the kind with headlines, the kind with checklists, inspections, replacements, clear explanations offered without pressure, doors knocked on with permission, meetings held at tables, not counters. Mara coordinated. Inspectors documented. Volunteers showed up. Ethan did what he always did. He showed up where he was needed and left when he wasn't. Rex kept pace. One afternoon, a younger man stood on Walter and Irene's porch, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He introduced himself as Caleb. I should have been here, he said, more to the door than to anyone. Rex stood between them, not blocking, not challenging, measuring. Caleb swallowed. I just want to listen. Inside, voices stayed low. Truth landed unevenly. Caleb's anger arrived first, then settled into something heavier when he saw the paperwork, when he understood the pattern. I work with systems, he said finally. Energy, infrastructure. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. Systems fail quietly, Caleb continued, until they don't. Rex moved and lay down near Caleb's feet, not guarding, present. That night, Ethan sat at his table with the metal box open. He took out one item and turned it once in his hand. He didn't linger. He sold it the next morning. No announcement, no ceremony. The money went where it was needed. Inspection fees, replacement monitors, temporary help until permanent fixes were certified. When Mara heard, she said nothing at first. Then, we'll make it count. The program's representative stopped calling. The audit findings came back clean enough to stand, narrow enough to enforce. Authority returned to homeowners. Clear exit clauses added. Independent counseling required. It wasn't justice with a capital letter. It was safety. On a cold evening near the end of the week, Ethan walked home with Rex as the town settled. Windows glowed evenly now. Chimneys breathed without strain. Rex slowed near a house and sat. Ethan knocked. A woman opened the door with cautious eyes that softened when she saw the dog. "We're all right," she said. "But thank you." Rex rose and continued. At home, Ethan set 2 bowls down. Rex ate first this time, not hurried, not delayed. When he finished, he moved to his place near the door and lay down, back to Ethan, eyes open, guarding without needing to be asked. Ethan sat and felt the weight of the day settle, not heavy, not light, just present. He touched the dog tags beneath his jacket once and let his hand fall. Outside, the wind moved on. Inside, what mattered stayed. Winter didn't end all at once in Frosthaven. It loosened. The lake cracked in long, echoing lines that sounded like breath returning to a chest held too long. Snow thinned to slush along the curbs. Roofs let go of their burden in soft collapses that startled birds into the air. Ethan noticed the change the way he noticed most things now, not because it was loud, but because it altered the rhythm. Rex noticed first. On their morning walk, he slowed less often, sat less. The houses they passed breathed easier. Windows fogged evenly. Chimneys smoked without strain. The town didn't celebrate. It adjusted. At Walter and Irene's place, inspectors finished their last checks without ceremony. Papers were signed at the kitchen table with time to read and space to ask questions. Authority returned where it belonged, quietly, without apology. Walter's cough still visited, but it no longer announced itself. Irene moved more freely. Her steps lighter in the house she hadn't realized she'd been holding with both hands. Caleb stayed. He didn't posture. He didn't arrive with speeches. He showed up with schematics rolled under one arm and coffee under the other. He talked about systems and redundancies the way some people talked about weather, plainly, honestly, prepared for change. They called it Home Guard in the end. Not a program, a process. Independent counseling before signatures, clear timelines, no authority without expiration, no visits without consent, transparency written in plain language, checked by people who lived there. It wasn't fast. It worked. Ethan never took a seat at the head of the table. When asked, he shook his head and stood near the door. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was brief. Rex lay nearby, eyes open. When the last audit report was posted, it didn't make headlines. It didn't need to. The numbers were there. The changes were clear. The pressure moved on to places that preferred darkness. On a quiet afternoon, Ethan walked alone to the small shop at the edge of town, the kind that bought memories and sold them back with interest. The owner recognized him and didn't ask questions. The keepsake didn't come home. What it became did. Monitors replaced. Inspections covered. A bridge held until permanent work could be done without hurry. It felt truer than possession ever had. When Ethan told no one, it counted anyway. Rex approved of the routine. He kept his place near the door. He slept lightly. He still mapped rooms when he entered them. Instinct didn't fade. It adapted. One evening, as dusk stretched long and blue, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and felt the day settle. He hadn't realized how much noise he'd been carrying until the quiet changed shape. Rex stood and crossed the room. He didn't block the door. He didn't face it. He sat beside Ethan's chair and leaned his weight just enough to be felt. Ethan rested a hand on the tactical collar. The stitching was worn, honest. "Good," he said softly. Rex breathed out. At Walter and Irene's, the porch light stayed on later than it used to. Neighbors stopped by, not to sell, not to fix, but to check. Soup traveled in covered bowls. Bread arrived still warm. Conversations lasted longer. Caleb spent his mornings on ladders and his afternoons at tables. He listened to stories he'd missed and learned where systems failed quietly before they failed loudly. When the last frost warning passed, the town meeting room stayed empty. It didn't need to convene again. That was the point. On a clear morning, Ethan and Rex walked the long way home. The path followed the water where the ice had pulled back, leaving dark, honest lines beneath. Rex paused once and sat. Ethan stopped. They waited together, listening to nothing that needed attention. Rex stood when he was ready. At home, Ethan hung his jacket on the hook and set his boots where they belonged. He poured coffee and watched light move across the floor like a promise that didn't need to be kept loudly to be real. Rex ate without delay. Then he lay down in his place and closed his eyes. Not fully. Never fully. Ethan touched the dog tags beneath his shirt and let his hand fall. He thought about the sign that had started it all. Just a name and a number. How easy it had been to read. How hard it had been to walk away from. Staying, he'd learned, didn't require heroics. It required attention. Outside, Frosthaven breathed. Inside, the house held. Winter had left. What mattered hadn't.